Exactly. And I was paying attention because I was really big into foreign affairs. I was a big Model UN kid in high school. That was like my thing. So I was really focused on all that. And I just pay attention. I ask questions. I noticed the patterns, so to speak. And so I had, at that point, I became friends with all the Daily Wire people. There was Cassie Dillon, this writer named Elliot Hamilton, a writer named Aaron Bandler. Those guys were Jewish, and I think they had visited Israel a lot. They were involved in Jewish groups. I thought they were my friends, and they were talking about, they were setting me up with a writing gig at Daily Wire. They basically did like a preliminary interview. They wanted me to work over there. And I did a lot of collaborations with them. I gave them interviews for articles because I was like a campus teen that was pro-Trump and all that. It was big fodder at that time for the culture war stuff. And then I started asking them. I said, why does the United States give Israel $3.8 billion per year? Because at that point, the new MOU had just passed, a new Memorandum of Understanding. That's the foreign aid for Israel. And they actually increased it. And they expanded it for 10 years. So I said, why are they the number one recipient of foreign aid? I said, they're not a poor country. And I don't even really know what the strategic value is there. I said, so why, since 1978, uninterrupted, have they been number one? And number two and number three, it's the same story. It's Egypt and Jordan. They're the second and third biggest recipients. And we basically pay them because they normalized relations with Israel. It's like a bribe. I said, so, what do you make of this whole arrangement? I said, is it because they are our closest ally and I'm missing something? I said, or are we being lobbied? And there's this deep contradiction and double standard, and it's obviously being enforced by foreign influence and money. And I remember they hated the line of questioning.
And when you say they, you're referring to this friend group?
Yes.
Okay.
This Daily Wire friend group. They were all writers there, and you could still find their articles online. And they, at first it was sort of playful. They said, oh, haha, very good. They almost thought I was joking. They said, oh, it's very funny, but you really shouldn't ask that, they would say. They'd say, there's a good answer for all those questions. They'd say, but the way you're asking it is anti-Semitic, they said. And we're happy to talk with you one-on-one in person, like they're going to teach me how to ask the question. They said, because the way you're saying it, it sounds hateful and it's wrong. And I said, I'm asking a question. It's free marketplace of ideas, I thought. So I kept pushing and pushing, and I was tugging on a lot of these different threads. I was also asking about World War II and about some of the narratives there, and I was asking about 9/11 and the Iraq War.
And where are you asking this? Are you in a group chat? Are you just face-to-face, like with your friends eating a burger? Like where, when you say I keep asking these questions, what's the setup for that?
We're texting in group chats, and we're even doing it one-on-one. One of the venues, we had a big Christmas party out in Western Massachusetts, and Cassie Dillon invites me back to her apartment with a couple of friends, and everyone's drinking wine. I don't drink, so I wasn't drinking, but we're playing apples to apples, and it's a party atmosphere. We're friends, we're having fun, we're political, we're talking about it. And this is the venue, and it just got increasingly cold over time, and it turned into stop. Like, you need to stop asking or else. And eventually, I kept pushing on a lot of these different things, and Cassie hits me up on Twitter, and she texts me this huge block text paragraph, and she says, we're not in the same movement anymore. She goes, I don't really recognize what you're about and your views. She says, I'm pro-Israel. She goes, and the things you're asking, the things you're saying about Ben Shapiro and other people, she goes, I'm just not a part of that movement. And she said, so we can't be friends anymore. So she stops talking to me, cuts me off completely. All the other people block me. Elliot, Aaron, there were some other people involved. They all blocked me on Twitter, complete ghosting. And I'm shocked. I'm floored. This is my first encounter with this kind of pushback, because you go into it as an 18-year-old in college and you get involved in these groups. I was involved in the Trump campaign, YAL, all these groups. And you think this is the free marketplace. We're here to debate ideas. It's a free speech atmosphere. And I'm also thinking we're all pro-Trump. And that's another big dimension of this is me. Trump was a huge influence on me. He made me a nationalist when I was a conservative. And America first was that operative phrase. I wasn't any longer a small government, constitutional individualist. I said, I'm America first. I'm about America. And so there's this deep contradiction on the Trump strain in particular and what they're pushing. And I said, it really shouldn't be there. If we're America first on China, Mexico, Russia, everybody else, NATO, why aren't we America first on Israel? So this was deeply disconcerting and weird and disturbing to me. And I was honestly just taken aback. I was like, why are my friends now turning their back on me because of a disagreement? Well, fast forward, I'm doing my show on RSBN. This is in my second semester, so this is winter and spring 2017. And I'm doing the show. The show's going okay. I'm not getting great viewership. Nobody was. And I get a call from my boss, Joe Seals, who runs RSBN. And he goes, you got to keep this between us. He says, but did something happen between you and Cassie? Because she's still doing her show too. I said, yeah, we had this falling out, blah, blah, blah. He goes, she's been calling me every day for the past 2 weeks. He goes, and she's telling me, well, Nick said this on his show. Isn't that so racist? Nick said this on his show. Isn't that so hateful? That's not conservative. He says, and she's been trying to get you fired, calling me literally every day for 2 weeks. I said, wow. I said, I can't say I'm surprised. I said, she gave me this very cold, standoffish thing. She blocked me, all the rest. He goes, not only that, he's a pastor. He says, she's talking to me about converting to Judaism, which of course she now has. Fast forward all this time later, about a year ago, she marries some Israeli guy and she converts to Judaism. But he goes, I'm a Christian. He's an evangelical pastor. He says, and I'm trying to talk her in off the ledge. I don't know what's gone into her, all this. And so this was how my college career began. That's sort of what created me. And then for the next 3, 4, 5 months, my life turned upside down where it was these people like Cassie, this guy Cabot Phillips. I think he was a Campus Reform. I think he might be a Daily Wire now. His father, Tim Phillips, ran this big nonprofit, Americans for Prosperity. He's friends with Morton Blackwell from Leadership Institute. This guy was coming at me. He was on me all the time on Twitter. And these people were just pushing this line. Nick Fuentes is alt-right. He's a white nationalist. He's a Jew hater. He's an anti-Semite. And, me at that time as an 18-year-old guy, I'm thinking I'm just asking questions, I'm just doing what we're supposed to do. It's free speech. I'm America first, the rest of it. And then the first big hit piece was actually written about me by Media Matters. Come to find out, Media Matters sourced the material from Cassie Dillon. She sent one of my clips. And I'll admit, it wasn't the finest clip. I stand by it, but it was, the way that I said it was sort of unfortunate. But she took a clip from my show. She sent it to Media Matters, and they did this big hit piece about me. And then I had the left breathing down my neck, Right Wing Watch, Media Matters, all the rest of them. And this was kind of like the launch of my career. They were trying to throttle me in the crib.
How do you know that Cassie sent the clip to Media Matters?
This was told to me by Joe Seals.
Okay, got it. So she was sending around clips from your show.
Right. And that's their move. That's what they do. As you know. And the show wasn't even big. I had like 100 live viewers. I would get 1,000 views per episode. But they were on top of this. And even Ben Shapiro, he quote tweeted one of my tweets and said, because I said something to the effect of, if you're Mexico first, live in Mexico. If you're China first, live in China. You're Israel first, live in Israel. And he quote tweets me on Christmas Eve and says, well, that's the surest sign you're an anti-Semite, is to accuse a Jew of dual loyalty. And I'm sitting there like, it's true. You do have dual loyalty. You're going to sit there and say you don't? So this was like it's maddening. It's literally will drive you crazy because by definition, it's gaslighting because you see it. If you're a logical person, it's obvious. And this is something that maybe is helpful to explain my mindset. I'm waiting for someone to prove me wrong. I'm pushing on all these narratives, the foreign aid, the Iraq war, all of it. And I'm waiting for someone to tell me, here's all the evidence, the obvious evidence that it isn't all just a big thing. Mm-hmm. It's not just a big conspiracy. And I'm asking in good faith, where is that evidence? Cassie, my friend, and all the rest of them. And instead of getting an answer, I'm getting blocked. I'm getting tattled on. I'm getting clipped out of context. They're selling me out to the left. I'm getting called names. And, from the very start, this made me extremely cynical and resentful and furious about the whole thing. And I said, I'm like at war now with the whole conservative establishment, and the same opportunities for advancement that other people are getting. They get their spot on Fox News, or they get to run a Turning Point chapter, you name it. I'm now being closed off because there's this smear campaign now going on behind the scenes of powerful, connected people at Daily Wire, a whisper campaign telling everybody this guy's an anti-Semite. And this went on really for many years, goes on until this day. But that was sort of my origin story. That's how I got started.